A lonely boy, a retired K9, and a secret that could cost them everything. Noah always felt something was off about his foster parents. But when a mysterious dog appeared in his backyard, everything changed. Late one night, masked intruders stormed his home, searching for something or someone. As Noah and his fierce protector Blitz fight to survive, a shocking truth unravels, one that ties them to a dark past. Who is Noah, really, and why will dangerous men stop at nothing to take him? We'd love to hear from you. Where are you tuning in from today? Drop a comment and be part of this journey with us. May this story bring warmth to your heart. Now, let's begin. Noah Monroe was a quiet, observant boy with large, expressive hazel eyes that seemed to hold more questions than answers. At 9 years old, he was small for his age, with unruly, chestnut-brown hair that never quite stayed in place. His clothes were always a bit too loose, hand-me-downs from other foster children before him. He had lived with Raymond and Lillian for nearly 3 years, yet he never felt at home in their small, white-paneled house on the edge of town. The town itself was unremarkable, a quiet suburb with neatly trimmed lawns and streets that felt too empty at times. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other, but no one truly cared. Raymond and Lillian Porter were kind to him, in the way one might be to a neighbor's child, polite but distant. Raymond was a tall, broad-shouldered man in his mid-40s, with thinning dark hair and a square jaw that rarely showed emotion. He spoke little but had a way of making Noah feel small with just a look. Lillian, in contrast, was slender, with sleek auburn hair always pulled into a tight bun. Her face was sharp, her voice softer than Raymond's, but her kindness felt rehearsed, as if she was playing a role rather than truly caring. Noah had never called them Mom and Dad. It was late afternoon when Noah walked home from school, his backpack slung over one shoulder. The air was crisp, with the first hints of autumn, and golden leaves crunched beneath his sneakers. He took the long way home, avoiding the main road and cutting through the old lot behind their house, a stretch of overgrown grass and abandoned sheds that no one seemed to care about. That's when he saw him, a dog. At first, Noah thought it was just another stray, but there was something different about this one. The dog was large, a Belgian Malinois, its body lean and muscular, even beneath the dirt and scars that marked its golden brown fur. A long, jagged scar ran from just above its right eye to the side of its muzzle, a reminder of a past battle. But it was the eyes that stopped Noah in his tracks, amber, intense, and filled with something Noah couldn't quite place: intelligence, calculation, a quiet, watchful awareness. The dog stood at the edge of the trees, half hidden in the shadows, its ears pricked forward but body tense, as if torn between approaching and running. Noah swallowed. "Hey there," he said softly, not moving any closer. The dog didn't respond, only tilted its head slightly, studying him. It wasn't afraid, it wasn't begging, it was waiting. For what? Blitz was no ordinary stray. Once, he had been part of something bigger, one of the best K9 units in the state. He had spent years working alongside his handler, taking down criminals, sniffing out danger before it struck. Until the mission that changed everything. Blitz didn't remember all of it, only flashes, gunfire, pain, the scent of blood thick in the air. A man, his handler, falling, shouting something Blitz couldn't understand. Then darkness. When he woke, everything was gone. His partner, his job, his purpose. The force had deemed him unfit to return to duty, too injured, too unpredictable. They sent him to a shelter, but Blitz refused to stay caged. He had run and never stopped running, until he ended up here, in this town. Drawn to a scent he didn't understand, a familiarity that shouldn't exist. And now, the boy. There was something about him, something important. Blitz didn't know why, but he had to stay. Noah took a cautious step forward, lowering himself to the ground to seem smaller, less threatening. He had seen enough stray dogs to know how to approach them, slowly, carefully, without fear. But Blitz wasn't just any stray. As Noah reached out a hand, the dog stepped back, not out of fear, but hesitation. Noah frowned. "You don't trust me, huh?" Blitz's ears flicked, almost like he was considering the question. "Me neither," Noah muttered. Something about the dog's presence made his chest feel lighter, like he wasn't entirely alone anymore. It was ridiculous. He didn't even know if the dog would still be here tomorrow. Still, before standing up, Noah reached into his backpack, pulling out a half-eaten peanut butter sandwich from lunch. He broke off a piece and placed it on the ground before backing away. Blitz didn't move, only watching. Noah sighed. "Your choice." He turned and walked away, heading home as the sky darkened. That night, Noah couldn't stop thinking about the dog. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the house. Raymond and Lillian were talking in hushed voices downstairs, but he couldn't make out the words. It didn't matter. His thoughts were elsewhere, on those amber eyes, watching him like they saw more than just a boy, like they saw who he really was. And for the first time in a long time, Noah felt safe, even if he didn't know why. Even if he didn't know that this was only the beginning of something much, much bigger. The wind carried the scent of damp earth and fading autumn leaves as Blitz lay curled beneath an abandoned shed at the edge of the old lot. The cold metal of a discarded toolbox pressed against his side, but he didn't move. He was used to discomfort. Pain was something he had learned to endure, a quiet companion that followed him since that night, the night everything changed. His ribs ached from the scuffle with the intruders 3 nights ago, wounds still healing from the streets he had traveled. But none of it compared to the pain inside his head, the fragments of memory that surfaced like broken glass beneath the tide, pieces of something important, something just beyond his reach. His ears flicked as the distant sound of children playing filtered through the wind, but it wasn't now that he was remembering. It was then. A man's voice, deep, steady. "Blitz, stay close." The smell of gasoline, gunfire, then nothing. Blitz lifted his head, growling softly at the ghost of the past, clawing at the edges of his mind. 3 years ago, Blitz had a purpose. Back then, he wasn't just a dog. He was an officer. He had worked alongside Detective Owen Carter, a man who had spent his life chasing shadows in a world that wanted to keep them hidden. Carter had been in his early 40s, tall and broad-shouldered with weary grey eyes that had seen too much. A streak of silver ran through his dark hair, a reminder of years spent fighting battles no one else wanted to acknowledge. Unlike most officers, Carter wasn't hardened by the job. He was patient, methodical, and he treated Blitz like more than just a tool. He treated him like a partner. They had taken down drug lords, tracked missing children, uncovered things that were never meant to see daylight. But the last case, the one that ended everything, was different. It had been a human trafficking ring, a network so deep that even the department had been afraid to touch it. Carter hadn't cared. He pushed forward, uncovering names, locations, people who had been missing for years. And then he found the witness, a man who had worked for the traffickers, someone who had seen everything and was willing to testify. Blitz remembered his scent, fear mixed with desperation. He had been a small man, unshaven, with a nervous twitch in his left eye. But it hadn't mattered what he looked like. What mattered was what he knew. They were supposed to keep him safe. That night, Carter had driven them to a safe house, an old cabin outside of town, far from the reach of those who wanted him dead. Blitz had sat in the back seat, ears pricked, body tense. Something felt wrong. The safe house was supposed to be empty, but the door was already open. The next few minutes were chaos, gunfire, the scent of blood, Carter shouting orders, Blitz lunging at a shadowed figure, sinking his teeth into flesh before something struck him, hard, against the side of his head. Everything went dark. When he woke up, Carter was gone. Blitz had staggered into the night, dazed, the taste of iron still in his mouth. He had waited for Carter to come back, waited for the sound of his voice, the familiar pat on his head that meant everything was going to be okay. But Carter never came, and Blitz never went back. Blitz blinked, pulling himself back to the present. The old lot was silent now, the sky darkening as the last of the evening light faded. The past didn't matter anymore. Carter was gone. Blitz had learned not to wait for ghosts. But then there was the boy, Noah. There was something about him, something Blitz couldn't ignore. At first, he had thought it was just instinct, a lingering memory of protecting the weak. But now it felt personal. His scent, his presence. It was familiar, as if Blitz had known him before. As if the boy was part of something bigger, something Blitz had forgotten. His ears flicked up at the sound of footsteps. Noah. Blitz stayed still as the boy approached, stepping cautiously through the grass. Noah was wearing a hoodie too big for him, sleeves nearly swallowing his hands. He looked hesitant but determined, his hazel eyes studying Blitz with a mixture of curiosity and quiet understanding. Noah stopped a few feet away and crouched down, balancing on his heels. "You're still here," he said softly, as if speaking too loudly would break whatever fragile connection existed between them. Blitz didn't move. Noah reached into his pocket, pulling out a sandwich wrapped in a napkin. I figured you might be hungry." He placed it on the ground between them and pulled his hands back. Blitz sniffed the air, but didn't reach for the food. His eyes stayed locked on Noah. The boy sighed. "You don't trust me, huh?" Blitz flicked an ear. Noah sat down, stretching his legs out in front of him. "I get it," he murmured. "I wouldn't trust me either." There was something in his voice, something heavy for a child his age. Blitz recognized it. Loneliness, the kind that settled deep, like a wound that never quite healed. Blitz knew that feeling well. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then, cautiously, Blitz stepped forward. He sniffed the sandwich once before taking a careful bite. Noah watched, a small, almost relieved smile tugging at the corner of his lips. It wasn't much, but it was a start. And for the first time in a long time, Blitz felt something shift. As if the past wasn't completely lost, as if Carter's voice wasn't the only one that mattered anymore. Noah had always known there was something off about Raymond and Lillian Porter. It wasn't anything obvious, nothing he could point to and say, "This is why I don't trust them." It was just a feeling, a constant nagging sense of unease, like living in a house that wasn't haunted, but somehow still wrong. Their house was neat and orderly, their lives carefully structured, but there was no warmth, no love. They treated him with politeness, never cruelty, yet something always felt rehearsed, as if he was part of an arrangement rather than a family. But now the feeling was getting stronger. It started with the phone calls. Noah was a light sleeper. Most nights, he lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator, the occasional creak of the old house settling into the earth. But some nights, when the world outside was completely silent, he heard the murmur of voices, Lillian and Raymond speaking in hushed tones in the living room. At first, he ignored it, but as the nights passed, he started listening. They were careful with their words, their voices low, but certain phrases stood out. "Not yet. They're watching. If he finds out..." And then one night, he heard his own name. Noah's breath caught in his throat. He shifted under his blanket, pressing his ear against the mattress, hoping to catch more, but the voices stopped. A moment later, the sound of quiet footsteps approached the stairs. He shut his eyes tight and forced his breathing to slow, feigning sleep as someone stood outside his door. The air in the room felt heavier, the seconds stretched unbearably long before the steps retreated back down the hall. Noah didn't sleep that night. The next morning, a package arrived. It wasn't unusual for them to receive deliveries. Raymond worked in construction, and Lillian often ordered things online. But this package was different. It was smaller than usual, plain brown with no return address, sealed with thick black tape. When Raymond opened the door and saw the package on the porch, his entire demeanor changed. He stiffened, his eyes darting to Noah, who had just come inside from the backyard. "You shouldn't be here," Raymond said quickly. Noah frowned. "It's just a package." Raymond's grip on the box tightened. "Go inside." Something in his tone made Noah obey, but instead of going to his room, he lingered near the hallway, watching. Raymond brought the package to the kitchen, where Lillian was already waiting. She sliced the tape open with a small pocket knife, her movements as precise as always. But the moment she saw what was inside, her face paled. Noah strained to see, but could only catch glimpses: a brown envelope, thick with papers, and a small stack of photographs. Lillian flipped through them, her fingers trembling slightly. She handed one to Raymond, who stared at it for a long time. "This changes nothing," he said finally. Lillian exhaled, shaking her head. "You don't believe that." That night, Noah made a mistake. He waited until they were asleep, then slipped out of bed, moving as silently as possible. The box was still in the kitchen, tucked beneath the counter. His hands shook slightly as he peeled back the flaps. It was empty, except for one thing. A single photograph had slipped into the corner. Noah reached for it, turning it over. His stomach dropped. It was him. A picture of himself, maybe from 2 years ago. He was standing outside, looking off into the distance, completely unaware that he was being watched. Someone had been following him. For years. His pulse pounded in his ears as he stuffed the photograph back into the box and hurried back to his room. He sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the door, his mind racing. Why would someone have this? Why would his own foster parents be afraid of keeping him? Then a new thought crept in. Blitz. The dog had appeared right after the phone calls started, right after the strange men had come looking. What if it wasn't a coincidence? What if Blitz wasn't lost at all? What if Blitz had come for him? Noah couldn't stay in the house any longer. He needed answers. He needed to find Blitz. Pulling on his hoodie, he slipped out the door just as the first light of dawn touched the sky, his breath visible in the cold morning air. He wasn't sure what he was searching for, only that he had to find it, because now he knew one thing for certain. His life was not what he thought it was, and neither were Raymond and Lillian. The house was silent, the kind of silence that made Noah uneasy. The wind barely moved the trees outside, and even the usual sounds of the town, a distant car, a neighbor's dog barking, were absent. He lay in bed, staring at the dark ceiling, his fingers clutching the blanket without realizing it. His mind refused to settle. The photograph had been burned into his thoughts, a reminder that he was being watched, that someone had been tracking him for years. His pulse quickened every time he remembered the whispered conversations between Raymond and Lillian, the fear in Lillian's voice. "We can't keep him much longer." The words haunted him. What did they mean? Where would they send him? Who were they afraid of? A creak echoed from somewhere downstairs. Noah stiffened, his breath catching in his throat. He strained to listen, but there was nothing else. Probably just the house settling, he told himself. The old wooden floors always made noise, especially at night. But then he heard it again. Another creak, closer this time. Someone was moving. He sat up, heart hammering. His first instinct was to go to the door and press his ear against it, but he hesitated. If Raymond or Lillian caught him snooping, he wasn't sure what would happen. Instead, he reached for the small flashlight he kept under his pillow. The dim glow cast long shadows across the room as he flicked it on. A shadow moved outside his window. Noah's stomach dropped. He barely had time to react before the glass shattered. The world erupted in chaos. A large figure lunged through the broken window, boots thudding against the wooden floor. Noah barely registered the black mask covering the intruder's face before the man reached for him. He scrambled back, tumbling off the bed, landing hard on his side. Pain shot through his ribs, but adrenaline kept him moving. The man lunged again, and then a snarl. A blur of golden brown fur launched itself at the intruder. Blitz! The dog's weight sent the man crashing to the floor. He barely had time to react before Blitz's teeth sank into his arm. A scream tore through the room, followed by a struggle as the man tried to shake Blitz off. The growling was guttural, raw, a sound that sent a chill down Noah's spine. But there was no time to think. More footsteps. Noah turned toward the door just as it burst open. A second intruder stepped inside, his silhouette massive against the dim hallway light. This one wasn't masked. He had a square jaw, thick eyebrows, and a scar running from his temple down to his cheek. His eyes locked onto Noah with cold, practiced calculation, a predator sizing up prey. He held a gun. Noah couldn't move. His limbs felt like they belonged to someone else. Then Blitz turned toward the new threat. The moment the intruder raised his weapon, Blitz lunged. The gunshot was deafening in the small room. Noah barely registered the ringing in his ears before Blitz collided with the man, knocking him into the hallway wall. The gun clattered to the floor, and Blitz went for his throat. "Noah!" The voice came from downstairs. Raymond. For a split second, Noah felt relief, but then he hesitated. Raymond wasn't shouting in surprise. He wasn't panicked. He was expecting this. The thought barely had time to settle before something yanked him backward. A third man. Noah thrashed, kicking out as the stranger wrapped an arm around his torso, dragging him toward the window. He caught a glimpse of the broken glass glinting in the moonlight before Blitz spun around, locking onto the new target. Snarling, the dog launched forward, but it was too late. The man shoved Noah through the window. The world tilted. Cold air rushed past Noah's face. Then, impact. Pain exploded through his shoulder as he hit the grass below, rolling instinctively to break his fall. He barely had time to recover before the man jumped after him. Strong hands grabbed his hoodie, yanking him upright. He kicked wildly, landing a hit against the stranger's shin. The man cursed, but didn't loosen his grip. Blitz came crashing down next. Noah barely had time to react before Blitz slammed into the intruder, sending them both to the ground. The man fought back, rolling to shield himself from the dog's relentless assault. Noah scrambled to his feet, his vision spinning. He had to run. But where? The backyard was fenced off. The gate was locked. The only way out was... "Noah!" Raymond's voice again, closer this time. Noah turned toward the house, and what he saw made his blood freeze. Raymond and Lillian were standing at the back door, calm, not afraid, as if they had known this was coming, as if this had happened before. Noah took a step back. "Help me!" He could hear the desperation in his own voice, but neither of them moved. Lillian's eyes flickered to the man struggling beneath Blitz. Raymond clenched his jaw. Something unspoken passed between them. Then Raymond pulled out a gun. Noah's stomach turned to ice. Not at the sight of the weapon, but at the way Raymond held it. Steady, practiced. Raymond had used a gun before. Blitz sensed it at the same time Noah did. In an instant, the dog leaped off the fallen intruder, positioning himself between Noah and Raymond. His hackles bristled, teeth bared in a low, warning growl. "Noah!" Lillian took a slow step forward. "You need to come inside." Noah shook his head. "No!" Raymond's expression darkened. The gun didn't lower. Then, a sound. From the street, tires screeching, headlights flashing across the yard. A vehicle coming fast. The intruders panicked. One of them, the man with the scar, shoved Blitz aside and sprinted toward the fence. The others followed. In seconds, they were gone, disappearing into the shadows. Raymond didn't chase them. He turned to Noah. And for the first time, Noah saw it clearly in his eyes. Not anger, not frustration, fear. Noah's legs felt like they were made of lead as he ran, his breath coming in short gasps. The night air was cold against his skin, but he barely noticed. His mind was still reeling from what had just happened. The gun in Raymond's hand, the lack of fear in his foster parents' eyes, the intruders escaping into the darkness. None of it made sense, but one thing was clear. Noah couldn't stay in that house anymore, not with them, not when he had just seen with his own eyes that they were part of something much bigger than he had ever imagined. Blitz ran ahead of him, his movements controlled but urgent. The dog didn't look back, but Noah knew. He was being led somewhere. He wasn't sure how or why, but he trusted Blitz in a way he had never trusted anyone before. It wasn't just about what had happened tonight. It was instinct. The old lot behind the house stretched into a wooded area, the trees swaying in the wind. Blitz weaved through the underbrush effortlessly, his ears alert, his body tense. Then, suddenly, he stopped. Noah nearly stumbled into him. A house had once stood here, but now only a rotting wooden shed remained. The structure was old, the paint peeling, the door barely hanging on its hinges. Noah had passed it 100 times before, never giving it a second thought. But tonight, Blitz was fixated on it. The dog circled the entrance, sniffing the baseboards, his tail low but wagging slightly, a sign that he had found something important. Noah hesitated. "You want me to go in there?" Blitz huffed, pawing at the dirt near the door. Taking a shaky breath, Noah reached for the rusted handle. The door groaned as it swung open, revealing a dark, dust-filled space. The air smelled like damp wood and decay. Old farming equipment lay scattered in the corners. Rusted tools, an overturned wheelbarrow, and a wooden crate that looked out of place among the debris. Blitz's nose twitched. He padded toward the crate, circling it twice before turning back to Noah, ears pricked. Heart pounding, Noah crouched beside it, brushing away a layer of dust. The crate was locked. His fingers found the edge of the lid, pressing against the wood, but it wouldn't budge. Frustration bubbled in his chest until he noticed something in the dirt nearby. A key, small, nearly hidden, its metal corroded with age. He snatched it up and with trembling hands slid it into the lock. It clicked. The crate opened. Inside was a wooden box, smaller than the crate itself. Unlike the rest of the shed, it looked untouched by time, its surface smooth and polished. Noah reached for it, fingers hesitant. Blitz let out a low whine as if urging him forward. He lifted the lid. At first he didn't understand what he was looking at. A stack of old papers, some yellowed and curled at the edges. A few photographs. A badge. His pulse quickened. He shuffled through the documents, eyes scanning over faded text, until one caught his attention. A birth certificate. His hands tightened around the fragile paper, his breath catching in his throat. The name written there was not Noah Porter. It was Elias Monroe. Elias stared at the document, his vision blurring. This had to be a mistake. He had been Noah his whole life, hadn't he? His eyes darted to the other papers. Medical records, a missing persons report. They all carried the same name. His name. Or at least, the name he was supposed to have. A cold chill ran through him. Who had erased Elias Monroe, and why had Raymond and Lillian pretended he was someone else? His hands were shaking now. He fumbled through the stack, searching for something, anything that would make sense. Then he saw it. A photo. It was old, taken with an instant camera, its edges bent with time. In it, a man stood holding a baby. The man had kind eyes, dark hair streaked with grey, and a sharp but gentle face. His arms cradled the infant protectively. Noah or Elias felt like he couldn't breathe. This was him. He was the baby. Who was the man? Blitz let out a sharp breath, drawing Noah's attention. The dog's nose nudged something at the bottom of the box. Noah reached down and pulled out a badge. It was tarnished but still legible. Eloise Carter, detective. The name was unfamiliar, but something about it made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. Had this detective been looking for him? Why was her badge here, buried with his birth records? Noah pressed his thumb against the metal plate, his thoughts spiraling. His entire life had just been ripped apart. His name wasn't real. His past had been erased. He wasn't a foster child who had nowhere to go. He had belonged somewhere once. Someone had stolen him, and someone had been trying to find him. A noise outside made him freeze. Blitz's ears perked up. The dog's body tensed. Footsteps. Noah's stomach twisted. He stuffed the papers and badge back into the box, gripping it tightly. The shed wasn't safe anymore. Blitz was already moving toward the door, his movements calculated, silent. Noah followed, peeking outside. The yard was empty, the trees swaying in the wind, but that didn't mean no one was there. Blitz let out a quiet growl. Noah's hands clenched around the box. He wasn't just running from danger anymore. He was running toward the truth. He had to find Eloise Carter, and he had to do it before it was too late. Noah clutched the wooden box to his chest as he ran, his breath sharp in the cold night air. His legs ached, his hoodie damp with sweat, but he didn't stop. Blitz ran beside him, his movements swift and controlled, his amber eyes scanning the streets for threats. They had to move fast. He had to get to the police before Raymond and Lillian realized he was gone. The town was quiet at this hour, the streetlights casting long, eerie shadows across the sidewalks. Noah's mind raced as he tried to piece everything together. The false identity, the missing persons report, the detective's badge buried in that box. Eloise Carter. He didn't know who she was, but she was his only lead. If she had been looking for him, maybe, just maybe, she could help him now. The police station wasn't far, but it felt like miles. His pulse thundered in his ears as he reached the building, its dull grey facade looming over the empty street. The large glass doors reflected his wide-eyed, exhausted expression back at him. For a moment he hesitated. Would they even believe him? What if Raymond and Lillian had already gotten to them? But then Blitz gave a low, reassuring huff and nudged his leg. Noah straightened his shoulders. He had come this far. There was no turning back now. He pushed through the doors, stepping into the brightly lit lobby. The air smelled like stale coffee and disinfectant. A bored-looking officer sat behind the front desk, his belly spilling over his belt as he typed lazily on a computer. His name tag read, Officer Grayson. He looked up when Noah entered, his thick eyebrows knitting together in mild confusion. "Kid, it's the middle of the night," Grayson said, his voice slow, unimpressed. "What are you doing here?" Noah hesitated, his grip tightening on the box. I need to talk to someone. A detective. It's important." Grayson sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. "You lost or something?" His gaze flicked to Blitz, who stood alert beside Noah, tail still, ears pricked. "That your dog?" Noah swallowed. "Please, I need to talk to Detective Eloise Carter." Grayson's posture changed immediately. His chair creaked as he sat up straighter, his eyes narrowing. "What did you just say?" "Eloise Carter," Noah repeated, his heart pounding. "I need to see her. It's about—" He hesitated. "It's about me." Grayson's gaze lingered on him for a second longer before he picked up the phone, muttering something under his breath. Noah couldn't hear what he said, but the way his expression had shifted from disinterest to sharp focus told him enough. A few moments later, he set the phone down. "Wait here." Noah stood frozen in place as Grayson disappeared through a side door. The lobby was silent, except for the faint hum of an old vending machine and the distant sound of voices from deeper inside the station. He fought the urge to run, then the door swung open again. A woman stepped through. She was tall and lean, her presence commanding without being loud. Her dark brown hair was pulled back into a low, loose ponytail, strands escaping around her sharp, angular face. There were faint lines around her grey eyes, tired eyes, eyes that had seen too much but never stopped looking. She wore plain dark slacks and a fitted grey jacket over a crisp white blouse. A gun was holstered at her side, but she carried herself with the ease of someone who didn't need it to assert control. For a moment she simply stared at Noah. Then her gaze shifted to Blitz. Her entire body went rigid. Blitz took a step forward, his head tilting slightly. The tension in the air thickened. Noah watched as something flickered in the detective's expression. Shock, recognition. "Blitz?" The word came out barely above a whisper, like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Blitz didn't move, but his ears twitched. Eloise took another step closer, her hand tightening into a fist at her side. "That's not possible," she murmured. Noah looked between them, confusion and urgency battling inside him. "You know him?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she knelt down, her fingers hesitantly reaching out, like she was afraid this was a dream. Blitz didn't flinch. He let her touch him, her palm pressing gently against his head. Then a broken breath escaped her lips. "They told me you were dead," she said, her voice raw. Noah's stomach twisted. "What do you mean?" Eloise finally looked at him, her gaze unreadable but intensely focused now. "Where did you find him?" "He found me," Noah corrected. He hesitated before holding out the wooden box. And I found this. She took it from him carefully, lifting the lid. The moment she saw what was inside, her expression changed again, from disbelief to something dangerously close to anger. She pulled out the birth certificate first, her eyes scanning the name, Elias Monroe. Noah saw her jaw tighten. Then she reached for the old badge, her own badge. The room felt colder. Eloise stood abruptly, gripping the box like it was a bomb about to explode. She turned to Officer Grayson. "Get me everything we have on the Monroe case, now." Grayson hesitated. "Detective, now." Noah took a step back. "What's going on?" Eloise exhaled, running a hand down her face, before finally looking at him like she was really seeing him for the first time. "You're not just some kid in the foster system, Noah," she said slowly. "You're the son of a man who was murdered to keep a secret." The words hit like a punch to the chest. Noah's legs nearly gave out beneath him. "My what?" His voice felt distant. Eloise hesitated, watching his reaction carefully. "Your father, Daniel Monroe, was the key witness in a case I was investigating 3 years ago, a case that nearly got me killed. He was supposed to testify against a major trafficking ring, but before he could, he was assassinated. And then," she swallowed, "you disappeared." Noah couldn't breathe. It didn't make sense. None of this made sense. I don't remember any of that," he whispered. Eloise's face softened just slightly. "You wouldn't. You were too young." Blitz let out a low sound, shifting closer to Noah's side. He didn't understand the words being exchanged, but he could feel the weight of the moment. Eloise took a deep breath, running a hand over the badge in her grip. "I thought Blitz died the night Daniel was killed. That entire operation—" She shook her head, forcing the thought away. "If he survived, then that means someone wanted him gone just as much as they wanted you gone." Noah felt like the floor had vanished beneath him. His entire life had been a lie, his name, his past, and his parents, everything. And now, the only person who had answers was standing in front of him. His only question was, would he survive long enough to hear them all? Eloise sat at her desk, flipping through the old case file, her sharp eyes scanning the yellowed pages. The dim glow from the desk lamp cast long shadows across the room, making the space feel smaller than it was. The police station was quiet at this hour, with only a few officers moving in the background, their voices distant murmurs. But despite the stillness, tension hung thick in the air. She could feel it, the calm before the storm. Across from her, Noah sat stiffly in a chair, his fingers clenched together in his lap. He still hadn't fully processed what she had told him. That his father had been murdered, that his entire life had been built on a lie, that the people he had trusted, the ones who had raised him, weren't just distant foster parents. They were hiding him. Blitz lay at his feet, his body coiled and tense, ears twitching at every small sound. Eloise flipped to the next page, a grainy photograph of Daniel Monroe staring up at her. His features were strong, dark eyes, square jaw, the look of a man who had seen too much but still believed in doing the right thing. He had been one of her best informants, a man who had risked everything to expose a powerful trafficking ring. But before he could testify, he had been killed. The murder had been too clean, too precise, and she had known from the moment she saw the scene that it was a professional hit. She never found his son, until now. She let out a slow breath, her fingers tightening around the file. "Noah, this case, your father, he wasn't just a random witness. He had something they didn't want the world to know, something worth killing for." Noah swallowed, his voice small. "Then why did they keep me alive?" Eloise didn't have an answer. Before she could say anything, a sharp, buzzing sound filled the air, an alert flashing on her computer screen. Her heart dropped. Unauthorized access detected. Her hands flew to the keyboard. Someone was in the system, searching for something. No, searching for them. She stood abruptly. "We need to go, now." Noah barely had time to react before the lights cut out. The police station was thrown into darkness. The faint emergency lights flickered on, casting an eerie red glow across the walls. Blitz let out a low growl, his body shifting closer to Noah's side. Then gunfire. A deafening crack rang through the station, followed by the sound of shattering glass. Eloise pulled her weapon in an instant, her movements quick and controlled. "Get down!" she ordered, pushing Noah behind her as she crouched low. Through the glass walls of the office, she saw them. Dark figures moving like shadows, faces covered, weapons drawn. This wasn't a random attack. They had come for Noah. Eloise fired first, a sharp, controlled shot that hit the first intruder square in the shoulder. The man stumbled back, crashing against a desk, but the others kept coming. More shots erupted around them, papers flying into the air as bullets tore through furniture. Blitz snarled and launched forward. He moved like a ghost, silent and lethal, his powerful frame colliding with one of the attackers. A strangled yell rang out as the man went down, Blitz's teeth sinking into his arm. The others hesitated for a split second, just enough time for Eloise to grab Noah and move. "Go, move!" she ordered, pulling Noah toward the back exit. Noah's legs felt like lead, but he ran. The hallway was chaos. Officers shouting, gunfire echoing, shadows flickering under the emergency lights. He barely registered the sounds as he clung to the box, his heart hammering against his ribs. They burst through the back door into the cold night air, the alley behind the station barely illuminated by a flickering streetlight. Blitz skidded to a stop beside them, his breath heavy, but his body still coiled, ready for more. Eloise pulled Noah forward, her eyes scanning the empty street. "We need a car." Before she could move, tires screeched at the end of the alley. A black SUV, no headlights, no plates. The doors swung open. More men, more guns. "Run!" Eloise yelled, grabbing Noah's arm and dragging him toward the other side of the alley. Blitz kept pace, his growls low and menacing. A shot rang out. The bullet whizzed past Noah's head, embedding itself into the brick wall beside him. He flinched, his breath catching in his throat. Eloise fired back without hesitation, her aim deadly, but there were too many of them. They needed cover, they needed to get out of the city. She spotted an old pickup truck parked near a loading dock, its keys still in the ignition. Probably belonged to one of the workers from the bakery next door. Without a second thought, she yanked the door open and shoved Noah inside. "Stay down!" she barked before sliding into the driver's seat. Blitz leapt into the truck just as gunfire erupted again, shattering the rear windshield. Noah barely had time to duck before Eloise slammed her foot on the gas. The truck lurched forward, tires screeching against the pavement. The SUV behind them peeled out of the alley, chasing them. Noah clutched the seat, his breath ragged. "They're still coming!" Eloise's grip on the wheel was tight, her knuckles white. "I know!" She took a sharp turn onto the highway, nearly clipping another car. The city lights blurred past them, but the SUV didn't stop. It gained on them fast. Blitz let out a sharp bark, his body bracing against the floor of the truck as Eloise swerved through traffic. Noah's stomach churned. "Where are we going?" Eloise's jaw was clenched, her eyes scanning the road ahead. "We can't stay here. They own this city." She reached for the radio, pressing a button. "Grayson, it's Carter. I need a clean exit out of town now." Static. Then a gruff voice came through. "Jesus, Carter. What the hell is going on?" "No time. Get me an off-grid route. Burn every trace of us from the system." There was a pause, then, "Roger that. Sending coordinates now." A second later, the GPS screen lit up with a route leading away from the city. Eloise's foot pressed harder against the gas. Noah turned in his seat, watching the headlights behind them. The SUV wasn't slowing down. Then, another gunshot. The back tire exploded. The truck swerved violently. Eloise fought for control, her muscles straining as she forced the truck onto a side road, kicking up dust and gravel. The SUV followed, relentless. Blitz snarled, his ears flattened against his head. Then suddenly, headlights appeared ahead of them. Another vehicle. A second SUV. Noah's breath caught. "They're cutting us off." Eloise didn't slow down. Instead, she did the only thing she could. She turned off the road completely. The truck plunged into the darkness, crashing through a line of trees and disappearing into the forest beyond. The last thing Noah heard before they were swallowed by the night was the sound of tires skidding, voices shouting, and then silence. The truck's tires crunched against the damp earth as Eloise guided it deeper into the dense forest. The world outside the windshield was pitch black, only the dim glow of the dashboard illuminating their faces. Noah sat in the passenger seat, gripping the wooden box tightly against his chest, his breathing uneven. Blitz lay in the back, his body coiled with tension, his ears flicking at every sound beyond the truck's thin metal walls. The chase was over for now, but the silence that followed was almost worse. It left too much room for thoughts. Eloise's hands were steady on the wheel, but her jaw was tight, her mind working through the puzzle as fast as it could. The name Elias Monroe had been a distant ghost for years, one of many cases that had slipped into the abyss of unsolved crimes. And yet, here he was, sitting next to her, alive, breathing, hunted. Every part of her screamed that this wasn't just about his father's murder anymore. It was something bigger. They reached an abandoned roadside cabin, half hidden between the thick trees, its wooden walls dark with age and neglect. Eloise pulled the truck to a stop and killed the engine. The silence that followed was deafening. She turned to Noah. "We're safe here for now," she said, her voice level but firm. "But we don't have much time." Noah hesitated before nodding. He followed her inside, Blitz slipping in behind him like a shadow. The cabin smelled of dust and old wood, the air stale with disuse. It had once been a hunting lodge, long forgotten, but it would serve their purpose. Eloise set the box on a small table and opened her laptop, connecting to a secure police database through an encrypted link. She was going to find answers, even if it meant breaking protocol. Noah sat across from her, his fingers digging into the sleeves of his hoodie. "What are you looking for?" Eloise didn't glance up. "Everything." Her fingers flew across the keyboard. Names, files, case numbers. It was all there, buried beneath layers of bureaucracy and closed investigations. She searched for Raymond and Lillian Porter, expecting standard adoption records. Instead, what she found made her blood run cold. There were no legal adoption papers for Noah, no court records, no foster care assignments. It was like he had never officially existed under their care. She sat back, exhaling sharply. "They never adopted you." Noah blinked. "What?" "They never had legal custody of you." She turned the screen so he could see the void where his records should have been. "According to the system, you were never placed with them. No foster agency, no paperwork, nothing. You just appeared in their household." Noah's stomach twisted. "Then how did I end up there?" Eloise's fingers tightened around the laptop. She was afraid she already knew. She switched tactics, searching through human trafficking cases from the last decade. Dozens of reports flooded the screen. Missing children, botched rescues, names that had long since disappeared. She narrowed it down to cases connected to Daniel Monroe. The further she dug, the worse it got. Raymond and Lillian Porter were listed under multiple aliases, their real names buried beneath years of fabricated identities. They had been linked to underground child trafficking networks, not as buyers but as brokers, the middlemen responsible for moving children from one place to another, making them disappear into the system. And Noah, Elias, had been one of them. Noah's breath hitched. "You're saying they sell kids?" Eloise met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "They did, and they're still doing it." He felt sick. Blitz let out a low growl, pacing the room as if sensing the weight of what had just been said. Eloise exhaled, rubbing a hand over her face. "This explains why they kept you, why they didn't sell you like the others. Your father was supposed to testify against them, but when he was murdered, you became a loose end. They couldn't just get rid of you, not without drawing attention, so instead they hid you in plain sight." Noah's mind reeled. "But why now? Why are they trying to get rid of me now?" Eloise's gaze darkened. Because someone finally realized you're still alive. She turned back to the laptop, digging deeper, searching for connections. What she found next was worse than she expected. Raymond and Lillian weren't just working for a random crime syndicate. They were part of a high-level operation, something deeper, more powerful. This wasn't about street-level trafficking. This was about political figures, corporate leaders, people with power who wanted their secrets buried. Noah wasn't being hunted by a gang. He was being hunted by the people who ran the entire network. Eloise clenched her jaw. This wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about survival. She turned to Noah. "You were never supposed to make it this far." He swallowed hard. Outside, the wind howled against the trees, and Blitz stood near the door, his body tense. Noah's voice was barely a whisper. "Then what do we do now?" Eloise didn't hesitate. "We find the people who want you dead." Noah's breath caught. "That sounds like a bad plan." A flicker of amusement crossed her eyes, but it was gone in an instant. "We don't have a choice. Running won't work. They have resources, they have reach. The only way we end this is by exposing them." Noah wanted to argue, wanted to believe there was another way, but deep down he knew she was right. He had spent years not knowing who he was, and now that he did, he couldn't just run forever. Blitz let out a quiet huff, stepping closer, as if sensing Noah's fear. Eloise pulled out her phone and dialed a number. It rang twice before someone picked up. "Carter?" A deep, weary voice answered. "Grayson, I need you to listen carefully. We're off the grid, and I need every file you can get me on the Monroe case, classified or otherwise." There was a long pause. Then, "Carter, do you even know what you're getting into?" Eloise's gaze flicked to Noah. "Yeah," she said, "I do." She ended the call and turned back to him. "We have a long night ahead of us. You sure you're ready for this?" Noah wasn't sure of anything anymore, but he nodded anyway, because whether he liked it or not, this was his story now, and it was time he finally learned the ending. The sky was a deep shade of charcoal, the moon barely visible through the thick canopy of trees. The air smelled of damp earth and pine, a stark contrast to the tension humming in the air. Eloise crouched behind the trunk of an old oak, her grip firm around the cold steel of her pistol. Her heartbeat was steady, her breathing controlled, but she could feel the weight of what was about to happen. This was it, the end of the chase, the final confrontation. A few feet away, Noah pressed himself against the base of a fallen log, gripping Blitz's thick fur for comfort. The dog was tense, his breath steady but shallow, a fresh wound darkening the fur on his shoulder. He had taken a hit earlier during their escape, but he refused to stop, refused to slow down. He was a protector until the very end. The plan had been simple: lure them out, isolate them, end this once and for all. Eloise had made the call using an old burner phone, her voice sharp and sure. She told them she had Noah, that she knew everything, and if they wanted to silence the last witness, they needed to come themselves. No more sending mercenaries, no more hired killers. Raymond, Lillian, the real players behind this nightmare. And they had taken the bait. The forest stretched wide around them, the only sounds the distant hoots of an owl and the rustling of leaves. Then a branch snapped. Noah held his breath. Eloise's jaw tightened as she lifted her gun. They were here. 4 figures emerged from the tree line, their movements slow, measured. The first was Raymond, his broad frame dressed in dark tactical gear, a rifle strapped across his chest. His eyes were cold, assessing, completely devoid of whatever false warmth he had once shown Noah. Beside him was Lillian, her auburn hair tied back into a tight braid, her expression unreadable. But there was something behind her eyes, something like regret. Or maybe fear. The other 2 were the real threats. One was Victor Langley, the man behind the entire network, a powerful and ruthless figure in the underworld. He was tall, lean but muscular, his graying hair slicked back, his features sharp as a knife. He had the presence of someone used to being in control, someone who never expected to lose. The last was his enforcer, Dante Cruz, a man built like a battering ram, his bald head gleaming under the moonlight, a deep scar running from his left temple down to his jaw. His fingers twitched near the holster at his hip, his body coiled like a predator waiting to strike. Raymond's voice was the first to cut through the night. "This doesn't have to end badly, Carter." Eloise didn't lower her gun. "That's where you're wrong." Victor exhaled as if annoyed. "Let's be adults about this. You give us the boy and we walk away. No one else has to die tonight." Noah's fists clenched. Blitz growled low, his stance shifting. Eloise's lip curled. "You don't get to decide who walks away from this." Victor sighed. "I figured you'd say that." Then everything erupted at once. Dante moved first, his gun raising toward Eloise, but she was faster. Her first shot hit his shoulder, sending him stumbling back, but he recovered quickly, firing off a shot that barely missed her. Raymond ducked behind a tree, already calling for backup into his radio. Blitz sprang forward, his powerful body launching toward Dante before the man could fire again. The two collided hard, Blitz's teeth sinking into his forearm, wrenching a scream from him as they hit the ground. Noah barely had time to react before Lillian lunged toward him. Her movements were fast, but not desperate, calculated. She grabbed his arm, trying to pull him away from the fight. "Noah, you don't understand," she hissed. "If you don't come with us, they will never stop hunting you. You'll never be safe." Noah shoved her back. "You mean I'll never be yours again?" A shadow passed over her face, but before she could say anything else, Eloise's second shot rang out, hitting Victor Langley in the leg. He collapsed with a curse, clutching the wound, his expression twisting with something between rage and disbelief. "This is over," Eloise said coldly, striding toward him, her gun trained on his chest. "You don't own anyone anymore." Victor's lips curled into a bloody smirk. "You really think it's that simple?" Then he pulled a knife from his belt and lunged. Eloise moved to block, but Blitz was faster. The dog slammed into Victor, knocking him to the ground just as the blade swiped inches from Eloise's side, but Blitz didn't stop there. The fight was brutal. Claws against flesh, teeth against bone. Victor's screams filled the night. Dante, still bleeding from his arm, scrambled for his gun, but Noah grabbed a rock and slammed it against the back of his head. The enforcer crumpled to the ground, unconscious. Raymond, realizing they were losing, lifted his rifle, but Eloise didn't hesitate. She fired twice, one in the shoulder, one in the leg. He dropped like a stone. The clearing fell silent. Noah's breaths came in sharp, uneven gasps as he turned, looking for Blitz. The dog stood over Victor's motionless form, his chest heaving, blood streaking his golden fur. His front leg buckled slightly, his wound bleeding heavily now, but he didn't collapse. He held himself upright, victorious. Sirens wailed in the distance. Flashing red and blue lights tore through the darkness, officers swarming the clearing. Grayson was the first to reach them, his face grim as he took in the scene. He gave Eloise a knowing look. "Took you long enough," Eloise exhaled, finally lowering her gun. "Had to make sure it was done right." The officers moved in quickly, securing Raymond, Lillian, Victor, and Dante. The entire operation was over. Raymond and Lillian were dragged to their feet, their faces masks of defeat. Victor, still on the ground, let out a low chuckle despite his wounds. "This won't change anything," he muttered. "There will always be people like me." Eloise holstered her weapon. "And there will always be people like us to stop you." As Victor was pulled away, Noah finally collapsed beside Blitz, his hands gripping the dog's fur. "You did it," he whispered. Blitz, exhausted but unbroken, licked his hand weakly, and for the first time in his life, Noah knew what it felt like to be free. The morning sun filtered through the curtains, casting golden streaks across the wooden floor of the small house. The air smelled of fresh coffee, toast, and something warm, something safe. Noah sat at the worn kitchen table, his fingers idly tracing the rim of his mug. The steam curled up into the air, disappearing into the light. It had been weeks since the night in the forest, weeks since the past had come crashing down on him like a tidal wave. And yet, here he was, alive, free, and for the first time in his life, not running. Across the table, Eloise sat with a newspaper in one hand, a fresh scar on her temple, barely visible beneath her loose dark hair. She looked different now, not softer exactly, but lighter. The weight of years spent chasing shadows had finally started to lift, though she would never completely let down her guard. That wasn't who she was. She was the kind of person who had seen too much and refused to let it define her. A woman who had lost battles but never lost her purpose. And then there was Blitz, lying beside Noah's chair, his body curled up but his eyes always alert. The dog had aged over the years, but now, after the last fight, it showed even more. His once proud frame carried scars that told stories of battles fought and won. His golden brown fur, once sleek and powerful, had begun to grey around the muzzle. His injured leg was slower now, stiff when he moved, but his presence was still as strong as ever. He was, as he had always been, Noah's protector. The Witness Protection Program had relocated them to a quiet town somewhere in the Midwest, far from the chaos of their past lives. New names, new stories, a chance to rebuild. But some things couldn't be erased. Noah still had dreams, memories that refused to fade. Some nights he woke up gasping, expecting to hear the snap of a twig, the crack of a gunshot. But then he would feel Blitz shift beside him, and he would remember that those days were over. Eloise set the newspaper down, tapping the front page with her finger. "Looks like the trial's moving forward," she said, her voice even but firm. "Raymond and Lillian took a plea deal, but Langley? He's facing life." Noah looked at the article. A blurred courtroom sketch showed Victor Langley in a prison jumpsuit, his once imposing presence diminished by shackles. The headline read, "Trafficking Kingpin Finally Brought to Justice." Noah swallowed. "Do you think it's really over?" Eloise held his gaze. "For us? Yes," she paused. "But there's always another fight out there." Noah knew that better than anyone. There would always be people like Langley, people who thrived in the dark, who would do anything to keep their secrets buried. But for now, he didn't have to be part of that fight. He reached down, scratching Blitz gently behind the ears. The old dog let out a contented sigh, pressing his head against Noah's leg. Eloise studied them for a moment before exhaling. "I signed the papers," she said finally. Noah blinked. "What papers?" She leaned back, arms crossed loosely. "Guardianship. You're stuck with me now, kid." His chest tightened, not with fear, with something else. Eloise wasn't the kind of person who showed emotion easily. She was sharp edges and battle scars, a soldier who had never quite found a home, and yet she had chosen him. His fingers curled into Blitz's fur, grounding himself. "You really want that?" She smirked slightly. "Well, you and this dog of yours are a package deal, and he's growing on me." Noah let out a breathless laugh. For the first time in forever, the weight on his chest felt lighter. He wasn't just a case file anymore, a missing child, a pawn in someone else's game. He was Noah Monroe, or maybe Elias, maybe both. Who he used to be and who he had become didn't have to be separate anymore. Eloise stood, stretching her arms above her head. "Come on, we've got errands to run." Noah frowned. "Like what?" She grinned. "You need school supplies, and I need more coffee." Noah groaned. "School? You think you get to sit around all day with the dog? No chance." Blitz thumped his tail against the floor, seemingly agreeing with Eloise. Noah rolled his eyes, but stood anyway. He glanced back at Blitz, watching as the dog stretched slowly before rising to his feet. The old injury in his leg made him move carefully, but he still followed them without hesitation. No matter what, Blitz would always be by his side. As they stepped outside, the warm autumn air wrapped around them, carrying the scent of freshly cut grass and distant rain. The world felt different now, not safer exactly, but filled with possibility. For the first time in his life, Noah wasn't looking over his shoulder. He wasn't running, he wasn't hiding. He was home.